Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge, and today we have X-Men: The Last Stand. This is the third in the original X-Men trilogy. This is from 2006. It is an hour and 45 minutes long, which seems really short for a superhero movie, for an X-Men movie that is meant to contain something so huge in the X-Men mythos. This is essentially a very cut down, reimagined, completely done a different way version of the Dark Phoenix saga, along with a whole lot of other things thrown in, plus a billion other mutants, and directed by Brett Ratner, not Bryan Singer, as he had done for the last two films. This movie is not exactly beloved for a number of different reasons. You could talk to different people and get different answers. Why? Well, it was rushed into production because they liked making X-Men money. They really did. And Bryan Singer, I think he was already involved with something else, or involved with something else. I don't know. There was also some of the actors in this who are either killed off or depowered early in the film, who were super important to the stories before, mainly because they had other contractual obligations, but it still felt really callous to have them just eliminated from the story, given the fact that, yes, there are way too many mutants in this story. And yeah, we're used to having superhero films with way too many characters in it, because when you want to feature a lot of important characters, one, your film is going to be at least 3 hours long. Well, okay, around 3 hours long. Infinity War, Endgame, or you're going to just have to cut out or skimp on the storylines of so many lead characters and just pepper in tons of other extra characters as eye candy. This film has a lot of good things going for it. It is the sequel. It is the Return of the Jedi to The Empire Strikes Back of X-Men United, the second one in the series, where Jean Grey sacrifices herself for the team. And in the final moments, as you look at the waters after the loss of the hero, played by Famke Janssen, you look at the waters in the final moments of the film, you see a Firebird emerge. Never mind the fact that we really don't see a Firebird at all in this film whatsoever. We get the mention of the term Phoenix, but I'm going to spoil a lot of stuff here. One, if you haven't seen the film, then go watch it, I guess. But watch it after seeing the first two films, obviously. You want a trilogy, this thing, don't just watch this out of nowhere with no context whatsoever. And you will just, the payoff isn't fantastic. It's understandable, but they had to end it somehow. And they didn't have the kind of budget or the kind of scope to make this the Dark Phoenix saga that comic fans love, or the Dark Phoenix saga that casual viewers would go, okay, that makes sense. Because we didn't have the MCU yet. Iron Man is still 2 years away, and we were certainly not, even when Iron Man was first launched and everybody went, wow, who's Iron Man? And that was a great movie. There was still like this the slightest hope that someday he might join up with Thor and Captain America and Black Widow and Hulk and Hawkeye and fight Loki, and then an Avengers film would happen, which sounded impossible to get all those very different characters with very different foundations. Thor, a god, with World War II veteran, with tech bro. I mean, come on. It just didn't seem to make sense. That something of that scale to that point in 2012, the Avengers could not happen. And that it even got pulled off successfully to mostly rave reviews. I know there's some people who crap all over it still, but everybody has to crap over something at some point. I get it. But I enjoyed the first Avengers film. Whether you like Joss Whedon or not now, I still highly enjoyed the first Avengers film. That said, I know I'm not talking about the X-Men, but the Dark Phoenix saga is at least the type of story that deserves the kind of build-up and payoff of an Avengers film on that scale. If not, technically on the level of an Endgame film. Technically. But now that they've already done the Dark Phoenix saga story twice in the X-Men films, the odds of us ever seeing another one done fully to that level, the Endgame level, is unlikely to happen in my lifetime. They just have to reboot everything from scratch at some point, which is entirely possible in a few decades. The multiverse, hey, it can be done. Another generation will get to see that film made on the moon, in the blue area of the moon, up against yeah. You'll see Jean Grey blowing up planets, killing lots of plant people. I don't know. You'll get to see, the Shi'ar putting her under judgment and the X-Men fighting for their lives, and Cyclops doing what he can to save the woman he loves, but her turning an ancient weapon on the moon against herself to destroy the Phoenix, and then be resurrected many years later against the will of at least one of the people who wrote that story. But that's a whole other thing. That's a whole big scale thing. And of course, we're in this era now in 2006, pre-MCU, where every X-Men has to wear pretty much the same black outfit, because bright colors would be really unsettling. We don't know if people could buy into that. That looks too cartoonish and kiddie. In this, at best, they can have some different piping on the costumes. Speaking of Kitty, but a different Kitty. Kitty Pryde is in this, one of my favorite characters. Hers is pink. And speaking of hers, and she is now Elliot Page. It's one of the first times we get to see. We've seen different iterations of Kitty throughout the different films, just in little tiny cameos. Eventually, we finally get a full-on speaking character realized role with Kitty, where she's just sort of tempting Iceman away from Rogue. and Rogue really doesn't want to be a mutant anymore. So so Anna Paquin is sort of just, hey, I'm having feelings, let me just take a walk for most of the movie, or just take a bus for most of the movie, and then show up. And her life has changed. But still back at the school for some reason. I know. I'm being vague to a certain degree, but when they structure this, obviously you have to have Charles and Patrick Stewart, and we have Magneto, Eric, as Ian McKellen playing each of those roles. And two great actors, two fantastic actors, and two guys who define the characters, who are just, they look like they enjoy spending time together, performing, doing these, playing these roles, just because they like hanging out with each other. They're good friends. And in this, they get the CGI de-aging treatment before it was made good. It's one of the things that makes me just wince whenever I see it. They want to age them up by just squinting differently at the screen. Just because it's just, they look so plastic. It's just like they look like Shrek, not green, but they look Shrekified in the early scene, where we get an origin story for Jean, where it turns out that Jean, she's really powerful. And I only realized this, and I know this is just really dumb of me, but I only realized that they treated her condition not as something on a cosmic scale or anything else, which again, the worry of making it cosmic again would require so much more explanation. Here they just made it a mental break issue, where she's a little girl who is basically a jerk and super powerful, and And she likes having conversation with old men in her living room while lifting cars up throughout the neighborhood, just to show how powerful she is. Yeah. Can you imagine the insurance rates for everybody in that neighborhood? So yeah, in order to bring her into the X-Men, we discover that Charles has made a pretty heinous decision. Upon meeting her, he decides to clamp her powers down, just sort of cut them off in a sense. And that is actually eventually was written into the X-Men comics, that Charles had to really throttle her powers because they were out of control. Once the whole Phoenix story came into play, she had to have her powers throttled. She was one of the, if not the most powerful mutant around for her age. But in this case, the Phoenix doesn't come into play many years later. Phoenix is just what she calls herself when she's a kid with red hair and is really just a jerk. But Charles makes her nice by taking away that power, and she's Jean. She's the Jean that we have known for the last two films. And when those levels start breaking after everything she did to save her friends at the end of X2, well, the walls come down and that other personality starts to come forward. I don't know why I didn't really think that I just always looked at the things I didn't like, and rather than looking at the justification for how these things played out. And I understand it. I understand why they did it. And if you have no care about the stories as they exist in the comic books, this does make sense. Why she was a little jerk at age 12? Oh, well, that's right. Her powers first manifested, even though they don't mention this at all. Did they mention it in another film? Oh, no, they did when they did the First Class gang. The James McAvoy and such, that those the First Class prequel era movies, which were also I really enjoyed. We still have First Class to watch on our list here, and so we also have Dark Phoenix. But she apparently, her powers manifested when she was outside playing with her friend Annie, and Annie got hit by a car, and as Annie's dying, Jean's powers kick in, and she feels her friend die, and that's just traumatically horrible origin, and that's why her powers kind of got kicked out of kilter, and Charles had to put a clamp on it. That's all. Doesn't have anything to do with this story, but there was something in this that cut her loose, and that was saving her friends. And now she's turning dark. She's just sort of, she kills Scott. And James Marsden, he's, at the time I didn't realize this, but I had met James Marsden at a convention just like a year or two, not even, like a year after that movie came out. And I said, I hope to see you again in these movies. He's like, so do I. Because I don't think he really wanted to be killed off. Just maybe his role just lowered a little bit, but he was killed off, technically off screen. But by the way, you're going to find a lot of characters are depowered and also killed outright, including Professor Xavier. Jean kills Professor Xavier. But he comes back in the end as well, in a different body after the credits. This is a Marvel thing, after credits sequence. So I spoiled that for you. But then eventually that body that he overtakes looks like him, I guess. When the Days of Future Past story happens, or maybe that's a different reality. I don't know. All this stuff. These movies could every single one of these movies could have happened in a different corner of the multiverse. All I know is that Days of Future Past seemed like a means to correct, along with the Dark Phoenix film, both of them working together in tandem to make this movie not exist. Like everything that happened in this seemed to have been written out of reality because of Days of Future Past and elements of Dark Phoenix. Well, major parts of Dark Phoenix. Yeah. Anyway, Wolverine, of course, Hugh Jackman is at the center of this because he has to be, because he's Hugh Jackman at this point. He's a superstar because of Wolverine, and everybody wants to see him slashing claws. That's why, hey, Deadpool was going to make a boatload of money. Deadpool 3 was going to make a boatload of money. Whether or not it had Wolverine in it, the fact that it made so much money is because Wolverine was in it, and that just makes absolute sense. So when you're going to put Hugh Jackman in a movie as Wolverine, yeah, you're going to make him the linchpin to the entire story. Of course, he's in love with Jean. Scott's out of the way. Jean's now like all into Logan, and Logan's like, whoa, hold off. You're not the girl I thought you were. There's a kind of a sexy love scene. It's a little rough for a love scene, but it's, yeah, a little bit of action there. Everything Wolverine ever wanted, but the package changed a little bit. And and so but of course in the end he has to make the sacrifice. This is actually more of a reference to, I think, Grant Morrison's run on New X-Men, which Wolverine had to kill her in that storyline. Many years later. A lot of this also borrows from the Joss Whedon and John Cassaday run of Astonishing X-Men. Rest in peace, John Cassaday, who recently passed away this past week. The artist for Astonishing X-Men when Joss Whedon was writing it, and he's done so much other work since then and before then. But that's where I really got introduced to his work in Astonishing X-Men, and it's a huge loss to the comic book world. But so if you check out the Astonishing X-Men, you're going to find a story in there where they find a mutant cure. And Beast. Kelsey Grammer. We do get Kelsey Grammer as the Beast. That is a good thing. I actually liked Kelsey Grammer as the Beast in this. But I'll get back to that in a minute. They have a cure, a mutant cure, and that's part of the contention. There's a lot of good foundational underpinnings to the story. Like that, I mean, it causes Rogue to make some pretty big decisions. Does she want to be the girl who can't touch her boyfriend, who can never be in love, who can't, touch anybody without killing them? It's an important decision. It's a struggle that makes sense. And for Magneto to weaponize it, or put a stop to it and weaponize it at the same time, absolutely, he's going to do these things. Last time he tried to make everybody into a mutant. Now he's fighting to keep people from removing mutants like it's disease, curing people of mutancy like it's disease. Then at the same time, the moment like Mystique gets jabbed while saving his life, and she loses her powers, guess what? He just leaves her, discards her. She's not important. Never was. And that's the end of that character to a certain degree. She pops up a little bit later in a minor way, but she still shows up looking like Rebecca Romaine. So it's it's a good thing. But we get so many, there's so much in this that it just becomes a lot of nothing to me. We get characters like Psylocke and Callisto, and it's just, but I don't recognize Callisto. I recognize the actress who plays Callisto, but I don't recognize her Callisto, because Callisto, I remember having an eye patch. But she's a hot chick with a piercing that glows when you shock her. One of the things I realized in this, once I realized she was Callisto and looking at the credits, because I didn't look at the credits when I watched it in theaters, is we got a fight between Storm and Callisto, which is a humongously important moment in the comics when Storm fights her to take over the Morlocks. That has nothing to do with this story, but for the fanboys who say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if Storm fought Callisto? Guess what? We got it. We just didn't know it. We couldn't tell unless we, checked the credits beforehand in 2006. I wasn't going to do that. I don't like spoilers. So, but so we get a lot of this. We get a lot of other. Yeah, Ken Leung. It says he plays Kid Omega, but that doesn't sound right. It doesn't make sense. We get Bobby and Kitty together, Iceman and Kitty, who have a relationship in the Ultimate X-Men comics from that era. But since then, as I said earlier, Ellen Page is now Elliot Page. So we have a transgender actor playing who had played Kitty Pryde, and in the comics, Iceman came out as gay. So eventually, I know we're mature enough to be able to separate real actors and people from their characters, but there's a lot going on there. My only complaint in realizing all of this is the fact that, and I think I've said this before when we talked about X-Men stuff, the fact that there hasn't been gay, LGBTQ, X-Men, mutant characters, like, by the truckload before, like, the last few decades, like North Star and Iceman and a few others, is a humongous crime. It's just, I realize that the existence of the X-Men came out of all the things in the 60s with the equality for black people and voting rights and everything else, and also LGBTQ, before we even used that acronym. X-Men have always been, I'm not going to say the W word, but they've always been a metaphor for the underrepresented or persecuted minorities, for being who they are. So that story is kind of lost in it, but what we do get with this mutant cure thing is the fact that we get an argument for, is it a disease? We also get the introduction of Warren Worthington III, played by Ben Foster, and he's a kid. He's as a little kid. We get a flashback for him too before the titles roll. That he's a kid who's ashamed. He's a super rich kid, but he's ashamed. He's plucking out his feathers, his wings, and his dad is ashamed of him. But as an adult now, he has this cure that he's helped invent, and will take away his kid's now adult mutant abilities. So he doesn't look like a freak with wings. Never mind that he's ripped like crazy, and wings are pretty freaking awesome. To have those wings, good grief. Yeah. So, and of course, at the moment he's about to take the cure because Dad's convinced him to do it, he's feeling maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this after all. Maybe I should be who I am. It's the whole conversion therapy moment. Yeah, that gets thrown in there as well. Like, you're not gay, son. We can cure you. Let's just send you to this camp. Or just give you a drug that make you feel less gay. It's the metaphors are there. So, while there's so much going for this film, and taken in smaller chunks, I think taken in smaller chunks, not without a rushed, compacted timeline, and without having to cater to making Wolverine and certain other characters get enough time on screen, this could have been so much better. Wolverine is Wolverine, and he's fantastic. He's always fantastic. We lost Anna Paquin for most of it. We lost Rebecca Romijn. We lost James Marsden. We get what do we call it? What's his name? We get Pyro's in this because we saw him in Deadpool and Wolverine. We get, again, lots of balls being juggled at the same time. It seems that a lot of this stuff was put together just for a cool shot or a zippy line, he said. And it To me, it doesn't pay off as well as it could. If this movie had been made into a season of television that was 8 to 10 hours long, yeah, I know that seems like torturous if you're thinking about this, but this has the potential to really serve these characters better, and the storylines it was attempting to really serve, like to really put out there and say something, along with the action, along with everything else, making Jean a more sympathetic character, not just, I got brain problems and now I'm going to kill everybody. And, she's got the power. Thanos had to get a gauntlet with a lot of gems on it in order to snap people out of existence. She just barely looks at some people and people just start turning to dust. So, yeah, the Phoenix is humongously powerful. If we're talking about big level threats, at the comic level, we're talking from the comics, we're talking Thanos, we're talking Phoenix, we're talking Doom, we're talking Apocalypse, which, again, the X-Men Apocalypse film also just flushed down the toilet. And Magneto, for all of his struggles, is an A-level villain, but also a hero at the same time. He's one of my favorite X-Men characters because he is clearly a man who is doing something he feels is right. He's just doing it in ways where he does not care about the welfare of anyone but himself and his mission. Sounds familiar. And he gets to express that in the final battle. That's one of the things that I really did appreciate in that final battle, is that he starts sending in mutants where he talks a big game, like he cares about the mutants, and he sends the first wave of nobody mutants into this battle on Alcatraz Island. Okay, more metaphors. Sending into this battle, watching them just all get obliterated by plastic guns that shoot needles full of anti-mutant drug, taking away their powers, and some just dying as a result because they fall to their deaths or whatever else, and when they lose their powers. So, and he's just like, oh, we'll let the pawns go first. And then he's just like, I don't give a crap about any of these people. He just cared about him. He just cared about him and his own agenda. He just wanted to win. And that, to me, that did betray a bit of the comic book Magneto, because the comic book Magneto, I don't think, would have done that. He would have sacrificed every single human on that island, or San Francisco, but I don't think he would have just said, oh, you're the one who can make flowers turn colors. I think that was actually a mutant in the comic book Fallen Angels from back in the 80s. That character had the ability to make flowers change color. That was a power. But I don't think that mutant's in this movie. But that mutant would have been somebody that this Magneto, the Ian McKellen Magneto, just didn't give a crap about. Not the comic book Magneto. So, I could quibble about this all day. I could talk about it for 4 years straight because I know the X-Men. I love the X-Men. And I really hope, and as much as I love the actors, everybody who was in this, everybody who gave it their all, seriously. Halle Berry's, in this, also a reduced role, but we get Vinnie Jones as a Juggernaut, basically just to utter a meme and have a penis-shaped helmet. Colossus is barely in this. There's no Nightcrawler. There's just, there's lots of little Easter eggs for everybody to enjoy. Chris Claremont, the writer for majority of the X-Men history, and was the co-writer for the Dark Phoenix saga, makes a cameo appearance early on in the early flashback when Jean's powers are kind of going wacky. He's the guy with the lawnmower that floats away. And right after that, you see Stan Lee with his garden hose, water going everywhere. Those are two very important cameos. Oh, no. Wow, I have talked a long time. Sorry. I meant to press the button beforehand. Anyway, that's. I know I'm saying that's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But it's the X-Men. I think we only so far have 2 more X-Men movies to go that we have not watched yet as part of this thing. Maybe we'll get it next. 53. Nope. It will not be the X-Men movies. 53. Oh, okay. We have a short. Okay, I don't know what this is. I can't remember if I've seen it or not. We'll find out. It's just a single word. It's Destino. We'll find out. Destino on the next Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you back here tomorrow with that. Excelsior.